You see this window here? Yeah, well, this window and the many like it are the reason Sniper Elite VR is not worth anybody's time. Let me explain. See, Sniper Elite is an almost 20-year-old series that most people sadly only know one thing about. Yes, it's the game with the gross slow-mo bullet X-ray kill cams. Which, to be fair, is a really cool feature worthy of note. The fact that there's a system that can somehow determine which shots are just average, not deserving of an immediate highlight, and which are extraordinary, worth following to their destination, is really, really cool. But this series is so much more than these nasty squishy skeletons, and it makes me sad to almost never hear it brought up in games discourse. The fourth and latest game in particular I think is the best in the series, and honestly, one of the best stealth games I've ever played. I'm gonna describe it in a very controversial way right now, so turn away if you're a hideous Toe Jam fan. But Sniper Elite 4 is basically Metal Gear Solid 5, but better. Now, before you get all plump and pissed, I will remind you that I am the foremost authority on good Metal Gear Solid opinions, I am probably a bigger fan of MGS than you are, and that you are probably a loser. So if you want to argue against me, I invite you to come get on my level by first growing a mustache, coloring all of your hair gray with baby powder, and then reenacting the ending cutscene from MGS4 like I have. Otherwise, you automatically forfeit any of your arguments to me. Sorry, I don't make the rules. So, first of all, Sniper Elite literally is MGS5. It's an open-world game where you play as a lone super soldier, perform a recon by tagging enemies on your map with binoculars, and then slowly decide how to unravel their defenses and infiltrate their bases. Of course, this game has the advantage of actually being completely finished, which is probably unfair for comparison's sake, so I'd say instead that the one key difference between it and MGS5 is how the open world works. See, instead of one single massive map for the campaign to use as its stage, each of Sniper Elite's levels are their own world. In that way, it's actually a lot more comparable to Ground Zeroes than MGS5, which is why, honestly, I would argue that Sniper Elite 4 is a better sequel to Ground Zeroes than the Phantom Pain is itself. Think about it. What we got with Ground Zeroes was this hyper-concentrated stealth experience on this single stage. There were multiple points of interest and paths on the map that were all highlighted at least once by the various missions that took place here. The game seemed to suggest a follow-up where a single enemy base could be host to many different kinds of open-ended encounters. Sadly, that's not what we got out of MGS5. Instead, we received an open world that was entirely empty for the most part, with only a few main bases all interconnected by large roadways. Each of those bases got used for one or maybe two main story missions each, and then were cast aside as places you could free roam to later if you ever wanted. One in particular that was hyped up quite a bit, and in my opinion was actually the worst in the game, could only be infiltrated from one direction, and its only objective was all the way at the end. Yes, I did just describe a straight line. My problem with this is that it was totally counter to the otherwise open-ended sandbox-style gameplay we expected, the same exact kind that Ground Zeroes had already seemed to demonstrate was going to be the whole point of MGS5. So that's the first thing I really like about Sniper Elite. It's like Ground Zeroes plus. Not one big open world, every level has its own map. And while they're all very dense and very Ground Zeroes-esque, they're also much, much larger. Most levels take a few hours on a blind playthrough, and all of them feature special or secret side objectives that might either help you or complicate things as you progress towards your main goal. For example, you might decide to go out of your way to destroy an optional enemy research lab, but you'd risk putting your primary assassination target on alert. Or you might choose to free the local resistance fighters, in which case you could use their fighting as a distraction to lure out all the nearby camping enemies and either slip past them, or join the ranks of your buddies and wipe them out together. Sound familiar? Yeah, it's the whole MGS4 shenanigan, but fully realized here. This game is openly influenced by MGS and has refined multiple of its gameplay elements. That's why I said be patient, hear me out. Don't shit on Sniper Elite until you at least know just how similar it is to MGS, because otherwise you're shitting on MGS. If you are someone who's bummed out by 5 and you've been looking for something else, I can't recommend this enough. I should be real though, it's not super just to compare Sniper Elite to MGS so much. While again, openly inspired by it, Sniper Elite has a very different approach to stealth gameplay that I really appreciate and that very few other stealth games encourage, often instead penalizing for. See, in Sniper Elite, it's not all about sneaking across the map super quietly, never alerting a single guard. No, the game expects you and even demands that you do something every once in a while that makes a very, very loud noise, and that you alert almost every single guard on the map to your location. Because Sniper Elite isn't just an open world stealth game, it's also a sniper game. all that stealth, all that sneaking about, it has to be for something. There has to be a payoff. Every once in a while, and the timing is just right, you have to actually fire your rifle. The high power and unsubtlety of your sniper rifle is the antithesis to the stealth gameplay in such games as Metal Gear Solid or Hitman or even Sniper Elite itself. But the stealth gameplay is necessary for the sniping because sometimes you only get one shot, and stealth is how you make sure you're in the best position when you decide to take it. And here's the thing, the story doesn't end there. You don't take the shot and then mission complete. No, often you need to take many shots per mission. But how can that possibly work if you're constantly alerting the guards to where you're hidden? Well, that's where the scale of the maps comes into play. I don't know if there's a name for this in game design or like even maybe military operations, but I like to call this stealth by distance. Basically, it's the idea that when you take a noisy shot from so far away, it doesn't actually matter that you've just revealed your position to everyone on the map, because by the time they make it to investigate where they heard the shot from, you've fucked off, you're out of there. You've had ample time to duck back down and move halfway across the map to a new position. And if you've done your recon right and ahead of time, it's not really that hard to relocate without accidentally stumbling into an enemy scout party. Yes, when you fire, it is very, very noisy, but by the time they get there, all the enemy knows is where you were 10 minutes ago. How much good can that do them, really? Of course, this doesn't mean that you never engage in close quarter stealth. Obviously, you need to make sure your proximity is clear before you consider camping there for a shot, so you still do have the moments of ducking from cover to cover, doing KOs and hiding bodies in bushes, etc. Or, I mean, the game's open-ended. Maybe you don't want to hide the bodies, maybe you want to draw their attention to them, plant a bomb on one as a trap. I don't know, you do you. But the key thing that Sniper Elite expects even an expert player to still do, which most other stealth games don't, is intermittently pop up, deliberately reveal themselves, and then sneak back into cover. This is the real secret sauce of the game's formula, the cat and mouse cyclical stealth gameplay. Or, as the game's marketing calls it, the emergent tactical stealth, which is comprised of 4 phases: observe, plan, execute, and adapt. These 3 are when you're the cat, the hunter, and this one is when you become the mouse, the prey.
There's a time to be stealthy, and a time to be lethal. A time to go low, and a time to go high. A time to strike, and a time to move. Timing is everything.
You're constantly going from cat to mouse and back and forth, and what's so freaking cool about this is that being forced to do something that paints a target on your back feels really fresh, since in almost any other stealth game, it's grounds for a game over. Yeah, you can take advantage of its systems to extend the time you spend as the cat. For example, by only firing during sound masking events like when planes are flying overhead or right as a nearby artillery gun fires. But eventually you will have to greet your opponents head on, you will have to take an unmasked shot, and then dip back into stealth. That feedback loop changes the flow and intensity of levels. Missions aren't just a one and done, genre infiltrate, fight, evac, tension building linearly until the end. No. Literally every shot you take is a component of stealth gameplay before it, which you need to do to set up, and a phase of planning because you should consider your exfiltration from your current position ahead of time before you take your shot. A graph of the tension would look a lot more like this. A bunch of peaks leading up to every shot where you transition from predator to prey, and then a recentering as you slip back into the role of hunter and plan your next move. It's beautiful. What a fantastic game. I can't recommend it enough if you like stuff like MGS, Hitman, Splinter Cell, that sort of shit. The VR adaptation, though, I cannot say the same for. I won't beat around the bush. There are basically just 2 things that Sniper Elite VR needed to do in order to not be bad. And I feel like both go without saying. I mean, it's a VR version of one of the Belf stealth action video game series. All it needed to do was, 1, be a good adaptation of Sniper Elite in VR, as in, have that core loop, have the same gameplay, have the same systems, just be in VR. Like, be designed in a sort of way that if you've played the regular PC version before, you already know what's up, just now you get to be handsy with it. And 2, it needed to be a competent VR game, as in, like, I mean, it should just work the way anyone who's played a lot of VR shooting games would expect. Well, as you already know, Sniper Elite VR is bad, and so, of course, that means it fails in both of these regards. First of all, it isn't a good adaptation of the series it's a part of. Rather than dropping VR players into open-ended world maps like the previous game, the VR version slows things down and puts everything on rails. Each level is a linear challenge, point A to point B, and there are no major side objectives. As a matter of fact, it literally has Resi-style, typewriter-freaking-style physical save points instead of progressive saves. That's how linear it is. The tension is basically gone. You'll never accidentally stumble into a wild enemy patrol because they don't exist. You don't have to be stealthy all the time. The game straight tells you when you've killed the last enemy in your surroundings and when you can stand up and walk around freely. Unless the encounter music is playing, you are literally the only set of moving polygons on the map. Nobody else is there. Now, this new way in which they handle enemies and encounters with them has a couple of implications on the way you play the game. First of all, stealth by distance doesn't exist here. Enemies never exist far away from you because they only spawn in as needed. That means any shot you take, unless masked, is going to alert all the currently nearby, aka spawned, enemies. You can't dip away into stealth because they're too close. So instead of playing in a way where you take enemies out slowly, one by one, and have enough time to evade them and lower their suspicions, repositioning yourself for every few shots, here, the best way to play is to note the current wave of enemies, find yourself one good hiding space with cover, and then unapologetically take out every single one from this one campsite. Then, when you're done, you leave your cover, loot the bodies, move forward, and repeat once the next wave of enemies spawns in. This reduces the significance of your role as sniper and your use of your rifle. Like, the amount of stealthy map traversal you were doing between encounters in the original game was what built up the tension for when you finally got to take your next shot. Here, that's gone. Once an encounter begins, it begins, and once an encounter is complete, it's complete. There's no in-between, there's no mouse phase. Enemies spawn, you're the cat, you take them out, and then the music just stops. The game explicitly tells you, hey, you don't have to worry anymore, and then you're just not the cat anymore, at least not until more bad guys spawn in. If you predicted I was about to compare this to something like Whack-A-Mole, congrats, you win. They took one of the best open-world sandbox stealth games of the past few years, stripped it of its open-ended nature, and reduced it to a shooting gallery. I complained about this window earlier. Let me finally explain. In Sniper Elite 4, there are certainly many little sniper perches like this. The thing is, to get to one, you'd have to risk entering a building, but who knows if it's guarded, who knows if it's booby-trapped. And you'd also risk complicating your escape. It's a lot harder to exfiltrate a building than it is a shadow or a patch of tall grass outside. Though you also have the option to rig the entrances with traps yourself. So there's a possibility to turn this perch into a temporary stronghold of sorts. But the point is that in Sniper Elite 4, the open-world game, this would have all been your choice, whereas in Sniper Elite VR, it's not. I was waiting for this mission. I was really curious to see how they try to pull this sort of thing off in VR. See, every Sniper Elite game has at least one mission that asks you to basically do the whole all gillied up thing where you have to take out just one single target, but you've got to wait for the perfect opportunity to do so. Say, immediately after they step out of a car. In the previous games, half the challenge would have been quietly moving around the map, finding yourself a suitable spot to watch the target from, in time, of course, for their short window of vulnerability. In this game's take on this kind of classic Sniper Elite challenge, the level starts, you're already in a building, you've got a big swollen objective marker right in front of you that reads "Get to the vantage point," and all you've got to do is climb a ladder and cross some wooden planks, and that's it. You're at the predetermined window, the guy's highlighted for you, and you've just got to wait to take the shot. Not long, obviously. Then, once you've taken it, of course, there's nowhere to hide because you've only got one window and you can't leave the building, and besides, the game wants you to kill an X amount of retaliating enemies before it'll call the mission complete. But they can all see you, and the moment you pop your head out, they all start firing, so the next 20 minutes are you literally just fucking playing Whack-A-Mole, Puxatawny Phil style. Oh, that's an early spring for you. And for you, oof, that's gonna be a few more weeks of winter, motherfucker. That's it. That's the best they could do here. A shooting gallery. All the technological advancements of modern VR systems, and the best adaptation they could make of Sniper Elite isn't any better than the fucking iPod Touch version of Metal Gear Solid 4. Fuck off. The Resistance Sniper, possibly the most... I don't know, romantic of World War II armed operators. A soldier who quietly stalks their prey, deep under enemy lines, studying their behavior, gathering intelligence, setting up traps, part warfighter, part saboteur, laying in wait and doing whatever it takes to stack the odds up in their favor to make their one shot count whenever they may take it, fighting against the occupation, then dashing out before anyone gets a good look at them. A character and a role fully explored by the other games, perfectly encapsulated by the series slogan, "One bullet can change history." And then in VR, a medium where we can get closer to this world than ever before, reduced to playing a goofy doofus, a tower defense guy who's never given the liberty to make his own decisions and has all the challenges spoon-fed to him. Fuck, what a shame. This game could have been so good. It could have been the definitive Sniper Elite experience. But then again, it would have had to be a semi-competent VR game first. That's right, let's not forget, this VR Sniper Elite game isn't just a bad Sniper Elite game, it's also a bad VR game. Now, a lot of this might go over your head if you've not played a lot of VR games before, but I'm going to use all of the tools at my disposal to do my best to demonstrate the issues here. So, first of all, VR shooting games aren't a new idea. There are tons of really good and really popular independent titles out there that, over the past 5 years as VR has matured, have already filled most of the FPS niches and set standards for the genre. Pavlov is VR's Counter-Strike. Contractors, my favorite, is basically Call of Duty. Wardust is Battlefield. Onward is pure military sim, sort of like Arma, I guess. H3 and Gun Club are both fun roguelike sandboxes, and of course, Boneworks is for action fetishists. And each of these games follows the same unwritten rules about how movement should work, how aiming should work, how manipulating your weapon and reloading should work, etc. Again, sorry, it's hard to explain if you've not played a lot of stuff like this before, but it's sort of like how every console FPS game uses the same buttons for reload, crouch, and aim down sights. There are certain standards that you don't want to deviate from because you don't want to be the outlier, you don't want to upset players who have gotten used to something. Sniper Elite... I don't know if they've just never played another VR shooter before, or if they had such an ego as a big studio that they thought they didn't need to follow the indies, but these guys rejected the norms that most VR players have grown accustomed to and instead tried their cocky hand at reinventing the wheel. Because here's the thing, I'd be willing to bet nobody's first VR game is Sniper Elite. Nah, anybody who's bought this has certainly played at least one of the games I mentioned before. From the mechanics of reloading, equipping items, and lobbing grenades to more fundamental things like how movement or hand physics should work, the decision makers behind Sniper Elite just basically said, yeah, fuck what literally every other game is doing, we know better. And then everyone hated it, and they wondered why. Let me try to explain the hand shenanigans. This shit was completely bananas. So, in most VR games, the way two-handed weapons work is the game picks a leading hand to control the aim. So, when you're holding it with one hand, the gun will just basically point where your finger would be pointing in real life. The gun just sort of extends straight out of your hand. Then, the moment you grip it with your second hand, the aim changes slightly. Now, the angle of the gun is based on the position of your two hands and their rotation. That might sound super complicated, but it's actually really accurate. It allows you to fully manipulate the weapon, aim down sights really easily, and even, like shoot over cover in directions that you're not actually aiming. Now, the moment you remove your second hand, though, the one that's on the grip, the gun reverts back to following your right hand as the lead. It might look a little bit weird, but it has to happen. The moment you switch from holding it with two hands to one, the game needs to realign it with the position of your right hand the way it's currently pointing. Otherwise, it'd feel broken, it'd be pointing the wrong way. We don't actually have to imagine this though, because this is exactly what Sniper Elite does. For whatever goddamn reason, they decided not to do what literally every other game does, and instead, when you let go with your support hand, the gun stays in the position that you rotated it into. This feels like trash. This feels like you're not actually holding it yourself and more like it's been impaled into your hand. It is now pointing where I am pointing, but I can just fucking flip it upside down. My physical right hand is pointing that way, but my virtual right hand is facing my own face, and this just makes no fucking sense. Welcome to AAA fucking VR. We just fucking don't give a shit about anything, I guess. Oh, look at me fucking big shot with my fucking influencer stick, but one of the worst things about these hand physics shenanigans are that you actually just can't play with a gun stock like this. The way it should work, again, like in any other game, is that if for whatever reason you need to detach your left hand, say you need to reload, or you need to pull the bolt back, or whatever, the gun should go back to the right-handed alignment. But the moment you're ready to put your left hand back, the position that you have to grip your virtual gun should line up with the physical space that your physical cup needs to go in, so all you have to do is plug it back into place, grip, and you've got your alignment. Easy as that. Unfortunately here, because the virtual gun just decides to stay drooped, when you let go of it, often the spot where you'd need to hold it with your left hand isn't actually where your left hand physically needs to be to connect with the stock, so you have to do this really awkward thing where you literally just grab it and put it back into place, and I can't exactly aim down sights right now because my camera is in the way of where I would aim, but believe me when I say that it is currently aligned. But if I do anything that would misalign the gun, for example, if I fire and recoil occurs and I restock it, now the gun again is no longer in a straight line where my hands are. My hands are actually physically not in the correct positions. I can't even grip the trigger. If I were to fire again, now I put my hand back, the gun is I don't know how well this translates, but what I'm trying to say is I am holding my hands in a straight line, and the gun is actually just fucking off. It is like slightly off. I am pointing this way, the gun is pointing this way. I know that's a minor little inconvenience, but it means that I literally cannot play this game, because if I could aim into my scope right now, which I can't because the camera's in the way, I would not, the fuck is this? So, like, imagine you're sneaking around, you hold your rifle down close to your body, then let go with one hand for whatever reason, maybe you want to grab something. Well, now your rifle is pointing in a different direction than your hand. Straight up, your hand in real life and your in-game hand are pointing in different directions, and it's super disorienting. To fix it as demonstrated, you need to grab the rifle back with your support hand and physically lift it back into the correct alignment, as in the alignment your real-life hands already have. This is especially horrible when it comes to reloading. Of course, many of the sniper rifles are bolt action, and so removing one hand to pull back the bolt means you're slightly misaligning your aim every time, and have to readjust constantly between shots. I am holding my gun in a straight line, my dude is pointing it up into the fucking sky. Like, again, no other game has this fucking problem. I'm at a loss for words here, man. What the fuck? Ladies and gentlemen, a straight line. Sniper Elite doesn't know what that is. Again, super hard to explain, and I'm not sure how well the footage demonstrates this, but basically what I'm saying is that instead of trusting the positions of your actual real-life hands, like every other VR game does, this game instead decides for you where your hands should be and how they should be rotated, and that changes constantly every time you remove or add a hand to your weapon. Basically, your in-game hands are constantly a little bit off, and that's super frustrating. Next, crouching. Oh my god. Alright, so I should mention, this was one of the first things they patched because it was so game-breaking that they had to. But basically, so it's kind of a joke in a lot of VR shooting games that players will ask each other what the crouch button is. But obviously this is funny because there is no crouch button. To crouch, you crouch. Simple as that. Sniper Elite, believe it or not, has a fucking crouch button. Now, in case you haven't considered this before, automatically crouching in VR doesn't feel like crouching. When I'm standing straight up and I press a button to instantaneously lower my character's stance, it doesn't feel like I've lowered my body, because I haven't. It feels like the floor just rose up and hit me in the chest, and like I'm wading through the level like it's a fucking swamp. Now they'll probably say to me, well, you must just be an idiot. If you're comfortable crouching in real life, why don't you just do that instead and stop complaining? Sure, yeah, fair. But here's the thing. Sniper Elite VR is half stealth game, and so a lot of the time you have to be crouching behind cover or in shadows to evade enemies. And unfortunately, until they patched in a fix, crouching didn't actually count towards stealth unless you were using the button to do it. Which, I wish I could demonstrate. I never captured footage before it was fixed, but this meant that even if you yourself were physically crouched, on one knee, well, because you hadn't pressed the crouch button, your character was still in the standing state, which meant enemies would hear your footsteps at full volume and even, quote-unquote, see your hitbox even when you physically were well under cover. Yes, they patched it, but how in the hell do you release a stealth VR game where physically crouching doesn't count as crouching? Fucking unbelievable. On the topic of features that should be physically based, but instead were turned into button presses, how y'all feel about grenades? Now, in most games they're a fun little sub-weapon to play around with, but in VR they're a whole different thing. There's a little risk-reward thing going on because, yeah, they can be extremely effective, but the fact that you need to relinquish a little control in order to add force to your throw means that there's a chance you'll miss your intended target, or even worse, accidentally flashbang yourself. In Sniper Elite, to throw a grenade, you pick it up, press and hold the trigger button, which pops up a big shiny yellow trail, and then just sort of let go of the button to have it launch out of your stationary hand. Fucking game throws grenades for you. All of the fun, all of the danger completely removed from this horribly risky but entertaining weapon. And the worst part, you know the little yellow trail? That's baby shit. That's fucking Goo Goo Gaga shit, dude. It's so weak. It's absolutely insane that you can physically throw grenades further than your character can, which, again, you might ask, why can't I just do that instead and stop complaining? Well, because throwing a grenade doesn't actually arm it. So, sure, congrats to me, I can physically throw it further than the arc lets me, but I can't have the grenade be live when I do. I can basically throw a dud. I heard they patched in a fix for this too, but I honestly don't care. It's too late, man. Every other game has throwable grenades. Come on, it's a fucking VR game. It's the least we expect. What's crazy is, like, both of these features would actually be really, really good accessibility options for people who like VR games but have difficulty with some of the more physically strenuous stuff. Having the floor rise up to meet you or have grenades delivered for you is better than not being able to play a game because you can't pull off crouching or throwing for whatever reason. But these shouldn't have been the default, and they definitely shouldn't have been the only options at launch. It makes this big budget AAA studio VR game look incompetent next to the slew of indie games that have done this better. So, rifles, grenades, ammo, at the end of the day all this shit has to go somewhere, right? Most VR games feature body-based loadouts, as in, your gear all takes physical space on your body, say, on your character's vest. To equip a sidearm, you might need to pull it out of a holster on your leg. In some games, you have to press a hand to your left shoulder to activate a walkie-talkie and chat with your team.
You have a guy down?
No, we're good. We got grenaded at one point, but we're fine.
Thundercap.
This stuff is super immersive and a great way to deal with the buttonlessness of most VR platforms. In Sniper Elite, you've got a version of this, but it's incredibly poorly optimized. First of all, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing wrong, but I can almost never reach my back holsters. Your rifle is slung over your right shoulder and your machine gun over your left, but fuck, it's like I've got to scratch the middle of my back to reach them, which, forget about in the middle of a firefight. I have so much trouble with this, and notably, I don't in other games, so I don't know what the deal is. Now, something else they did wrong with this chest rig is that every time your hand grazes any of the 5 possible contact zones on your chest, your controller vibrates powerfully to let you know. This is super annoying when you're just trying to reload or scavenge things, or you're just literally standing still with your hands at your sides, constantly passing through your holsters. So you basically have no choice but to walk around like fucking Big Boss, like a fucking T-Rex, with your hands out in front of you so you can give them a rest from all the shaking. Not to mention, yeah, save your controller's battery. But, as you eventually discover, not only does this grazing trigger a vibration, it also cancels any other empty-handed interactions you're currently having. For example, here, I'm trying to pick up my dropped gun, but every time I do the flick, my hand intersects with my fanny pack, and it cancels. Or here, I'm trying to climb down a ladder, but because the rung below me lines up with one of my inventory slots, instead of gripping it and climbing down, my dude pulls out a fucking landmine I'd stowed away. Fantastic, grade A stuff here. Basically, I feel like the game should have better context sensitivity. I mean, it shouldn't be hard to detect gestures and have the game try to understand what I'm doing. I'm clearly trying to flick the gun over to myself. There's no case where reaching for my ammo pouch would look like this. Or the ladder. Hell, maybe the rungs should take priority over any other interactables. Especially in a game that likes to make so many decisions for you about how far you can throw grenades, about how to stay hidden, or even about where your hands should actually be, this stuff should work better. I think no feature in the game presents just how far the designers are willing to go to spoon-feed the players than reloading. Now, already the game kinda has a bloated interface, but on your guns you've got these little floating ammo counts to peek at. In my opinion, that should be enough to help you keep track of rounds, but they take it a step further. One of the most common interactions you make in this game is with the bolt of your rifle. You can pull it back between shots to eject the spent shell, or you can even pull it back and forth to rid yourself of live rounds in case you want a fresh clip for whatever reason. Except what you can't do is push the bolt forward when you're out of ammo. Instead, when you are completely finished shooting what you've got, the game lets you pull the bolt back and then locks in place, and if you check it, it prompts you to reload. Now, I'm not super knowledgeable about guns, but as far as I can tell from gun guys on YouTube, this is not a mechanical feature of the Lee Enfield bolt-action rifle. In reality, you should be able to push the bolt back, even on an empty chamber. And again, in other games, this would be the case. I've done this many times before, keeping poor track of how many rounds I've had left and pushing the bolt back on empty without realizing it. Sure, the game babies you and prevents you from having a bad experience where you've forgotten to reload, but It's the way they deliver that message that's annoying. I promise you, I've never been thankful for this feature. It feels wrong, like something's wrong with the game. I'm physically moving my hand forward in the direction of the bolt, but it's doing nothing. 9 times out of 10, my initial reaction to this was that the game was broken and not reading my inputs, not that I was being told that I was out of ammo and that I needed to reload. VR is all about player expression, and part of that, yes, is making mistakes. If I'm holding something in my hands and I make a gesture to manipulate it, then that manipulation should take precedence over any stupid game logic or warnings or whatever. There shouldn't be any artificial friction between what the player is manually doing and if that is happening in the game, especially if it would work in reality. Effectively, they just fast-forwarded the process of realizing I'd forgotten to reload, but when the game does it for me, it feels like I'm being punished. Literally, a control is being taken away from me and it feels like I'm being reprimanded. Versus when I fuck it up myself, when I push back the bolt on an empty rifle, line up my next shot, squeeze the trigger, and nothing happens and I realize I forgot to reload, the blame is on me. Sure, I feel bad and the consequences are worse, but I've learned from it and won't make the same mistake in the future. I've just been incentivized to get better at counting rounds because I know there's no safety net for me. Again, this sounds like it'd be a really good accessibility option, but it shouldn't be the default in a gritty World War II game with industry-leading ballistic simulation. Overall, Sniper Elite VR has made me realize that maybe this isn't a series that needed to come to headsets. The 4th game is a masterclass in stealth action, but translated so poorly as this is, there's nothing good ported over. Even the notorious X-ray kill cams hit different in VR. In 2D it works because it looks like you're staring at an actual X-ray screen. In 3D, every time you land a headshot it looks like it's fucking Halloween. You just open the door to some trick-or-treaters because a giant fucking skeleton man is standing 3 feet in front of you. If you want a good Sniper Elite game, play Sniper Elite 4. And if you want a good VR sniper experience, just play a sniper class in any of the games I've mentioned already. If you pick Contractors by any chance, let me know, because I could use some easy targets. But whatever you do, steer clear of Sniper Elite VR. It doesn't do anything better than any other Sniper Elite game or any other VR shooting game. It's a waste of your time. You should shut the window on that shit.